Hello, everyone. Welcome into our ESPN FC studios for this edition of FC Live as we look back at the game that just ended. Interesting result. I'm Alexis Nunes alongside Nedum finally, and the Shaka Hislop, who just enjoyed some cake with an Arsenal crest on it. The things we are seeing today, including this, a 1-1 draw is how this game finished between Czechia and South Africa. It was really a must-win for both teams after both suffered losses in their opening games. But in the end, they had to share the points. South Africa managing to come back late in the game in the 83rd minute, getting a penalty after it was Czechia who enjoyed much of the lead from the 6th minute. Just a 1-0 lead though, and we know that a 1-0 lead never really feels like a lead, and in the end it wasn't. 1-1 is how this one ended. Nedum, thoughts on the game, especially considering both of them really did need a win to get out of the group?
Yeah, firstly, I think by the end you're probably going to say it feels like a fair result. But there were times in the game where I thought Czechia were in the ascendancy. They were going man-to-man and around that midfield area. And South Africa had more possession, but they weren't creating a ton of opportunities. But then the biggest opportunity of the game is from the penalty spot. And I think for Mokoena to score in that manner is huge for them. And I'm with you guys. It kind of felt like it was going to be a must-win game for, say, both of these sides. Because as you look at the group, you would have thought, yeah, we're going to get 3 points here. Yeah. We're going to get 3 points against South Africa. We're going to get 3 points against Czechia. But the fact that it didn't means there are going to be lots of eyes on the next group game that's going to be taking place here between Mexico and South Korea, not least of all because if one of those teams was to win, I think one of the ways to separate positions is on the head-to-head. So you're hoping that whichever team wins is the team that you're playing in that third game who maybe, just maybe, wants to rest their players.
We were having this conversation before we came to air, Nedum. Listen, all things being equal, I fancy Mexico to beat Czechia, I fancy South Korea to beat South Africa. But which would leave both those teams on 1 point, which surely is not enough to get you into the next round. So the only hope hinges on, as Nedum was pointing out, there being a winner between Mexico and South Korea, and they making changes for their third game maybe gives you an opportunity to get 3 points, and 4 in total gets you into the next round.
Yeah.
But truth be told, I got a little bit of a shock when I saw that full screen showing South Africa 62% possession, because it never really felt like that. And I felt there was a lot of, or there was certainly a lack of quality from South Africa in possession, that as the game went on, you just thought that early goal from Czechia was going to be the difference between the two, because again, that lack of any kind of quality of real attacking purpose just felt like this game was going to fizzle for South Africa.
Yeah, for sure. And I think at this moment in time now, because we're in the second round of games, you know, we saw the first results. We saw the first game. We saw South Africa against Mexico. You saw Czechia versus South Korea. And you wondered what those performances meant. But now as you go into the second game, like, obviously, they don't necessarily need to, say, have Mexico or South Korea go a certain way, because they could, in theory, still win their third game. Yeah. They could do that. But I think what they've shown in the first two games suggests that is probably going to be quite unlikely. So, as I say, just need to make sure we reference that point, because we're not writing them off completely. Yeah. But we're kind of getting
we're close to.
But we're very close.
We're this close. Shut the door on them, indeed. But look, that would be no surprise to anyone. I think everybody going into this one, looking at this group, had both Mexico and South Korea as the ones to get out of the group. However, let's look at South Africa specifically in this one, Shaka, because after the first game against Mexico, they did come under a lot of criticism based on their approach, how they dropped off a little bit and eventually lost their cool, of course, giving up those red cards. What did you make of what you saw in their approach today?
Well, I want to say quite clearly slightly more controlled, but that's a pretty low bar.
You think they got a hair drying treatment?
Right, in terms of the first game. Mbatha got booked very early on, midway through the first half, and him having to come off as a result, I think affected South Africa. He normally controls things so well in the midfield for South Africa. And then them being undermanned because of those suspensions, they couldn't afford another, and so a change was made. Better, but again, I thought, listen, if I'm Czechia, I'm thinking this one, we let this one get away from us. Because even with the less possession, I thought they looked the more likely on the counter-attack to score. They had better possession in the attacking third or the others attacking third. But they themselves just weren't able to make that count. For South Africa, you were given a lifeline by that penalty, which you take, keeps you in the tournament, at least for the third game.
Nedum, when you look at just Shaka's point, this is, of course, in Johannesburg, South Africa, once they were able to get that equalizer. Like I said, they were definitely stressing for majority of the game. Czechia taking the lead with just 6 minutes on the clock, and then a whole 83 minutes had to pass before relief, some sort of relief could come on the faces of the Bafana fans everywhere. But Nedum, just to Shaka's point as well, do we look at this more and applaud South Africa for the fight back, or would Czechia just be absolutely kicking themselves that they threw away the lead, albeit just a 1-0 lead?
I think that's a good question, just because...
Thank you. I'm here all day.
It always throws me off when someone says that. Just because it comes from a penalty kick, and I think it's given for handball, and that is like almost a random, chaotic type moment. So for Czechia themselves, they know that South Africa didn't really break them down. You know, they had a ton of possession, but they weren't creating a lot with it. But the handball is a handball, and then as a consequence, from 12 yards out, Mokoena has the chance to level it, and you know those celebrations were very valid from those in Joburg. So it's a tough one to read. Like I say, I think there's probably disappointment that Czechia couldn't have pushed on to score another goal, but I think in some ways that probably represents where they are relative to other teams, not just in this competition, but particularly in their group. And it's disappointment, but credit to Mokoena for scoring his penalty, because he got picked up a yellow card early in the game, and he's missing the third game. So for him to step up knowing that that might be one of his last actions, you know, fair play to him.
Shaka, how did you see it as well, to Nedum's point, that it is difficult to say, but why do you think Czechia were unable to capitalise on such an early lead when momentum was with them? And Nedum, you know we love momentum.
Oh, we love momentum.
We love momentum.
I mean, part of I guess, the issue for Czechia, you get the lead, and there's a natural tendency to want to defend that. Even though it's early on in the game, you feel that this is a game that you must win, one that you certainly cannot afford to lose. And as a result, you're not as adventurous, you don't take as many risks as maybe you should. You are more focused on South Africa and making sure they don't score. And before the penalty, it didn't look like they were going to score, in all honesty. So there isn't that urgency, certainly not in this format, and against the team that you're thinking we have to win this game if we are to at least give ourselves a lifeline or keep ourselves in the tournament for game number 3, because we've expressed nobody thinks and either of these two are going to win those. I just feel that that's part of human nature and part of the game to want to defend that lead more than the pressure to add to it.
Nedum, is that the right approach? So this is a World Cup now we're talking about. This is your lifeline for either of them, because look at the standings. You know that both of them will be thinking, okay, this should be our easiest game of the group. So defend a lead, and a 1-0 lead, which we know, we say a 1-0 cushion, but that's not really a cushion.
Yeah, it's like, you are fair in saying this is the easiest game, but it's not an easy game. I think that's the thing.
No, it's not an easy game, but the easiest game of the group.
It's the easiest game of the group, but relatively speaking, like, all these teams have qualified to be here. They've all gone on their own journeys, and they're good sides. But I think in some ways...
Diplomatic Nedum.
Pardon?
Diplomatic Nedum.
Oh, I've not finished yet. Because ultimately, you know, it would be nice if Jamaica was there, if Trinidad was there, if Nigeria was there. But unfortunately, you know what I mean?
None of us are there.
So it's to be, what is it, throwing stones from a glass house, you know, that sort of thing? Yeah. But I think realistically, for the way that like this tournament's going, you can see the difference between the contenders and those who are there trying to go as far as they can. Because I think we've seen at times through the tournament so far that the better teams, when they do take a lead, they continue to remain aggressive and they push. You know, even to name one team in particular, like Germany were playing against Curacao and it was 1-1. The game finishes 7-1. The game was probably done at 3. Yeah. And by the end, everyone's like, oh, this is awkward.
Don't run up the score. Yeah, they're already dead.
But that's the nature of like an aggressive team that believes they can go, you know, to the final game in the whole tournament. So in some ways, I think it kind of shows some of the flaws of Czechia, because they can be organised, they can be tough to play against, defensively solid, but you need to get both sides of the game correct. And I think once they had the lead, they reverted back to the defensive side, allowed South Africa to get more of a sort of hold of the game, get into their rhythm. And even though South Africa didn't create a lot, but at the same time, neither were Czechia.
If we think about both teams now and try to get into either dressing room, Shaka, just as it relates to the last game of the group for either of them, of course, they're still going to wait to see what happens between Mexico and South Korea. But how do they approach the last game? What will they be taking away?
They have to, as we said, they have to win those games. And
you see them going for it, even though you know that's going to be dangerous.
I think you have to. And listen, as we discussed earlier, depending on what happens between Mexico and South Korea, maybe each of them, whoever wins, make changes in Game 3. But as of right now, the thinking for both Czechia and South Africa is those are games that we have to win. I do not think 1 point, or for that matter, 2 points, if you draw your third game, gets you into the knockout stage of the competition. So the mindset right now has to be, we have to win our respective third game, regardless of who that may be against for both of these. And how do you now, if you're South Africa, how do you translate the possession you had to meaningful chances? Not that you'll have the same possession, but if you're Czechia, how do you translate the counter-attacking effectiveness you had to meaningful chances on goal? Those are the questions. How do you adjust your front third to get more meaningful chances and go on and win both those games?
I think what's also really good here is when it comes down to the group phases and it's the 48-team expanded tournament and so on and so forth, they're going to be these many dud games, whatever. I think most of that's proven to not be true. Just because when it comes down to it now, that third group game will matter to pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
Because the difference between, say, finishing first and last might be a case of, do you win this game of football? You know, for as wild as it may sound, these two teams that we've just seen now, they're probably the two weaker teams in this group. However, there is a world where one of them finishes second and enters into the knockout stages in a run which maybe suits them. So, like, as I say, I love it. There's this old jostling to start with, but now it's permutations. You know, for Czechia, for South Africa, they'll be watching the South Korea-Mexico game, and they'll be watching every other game because all of a sudden that sort of wall chart that you've got starts to make more sense. Well, if we win this, then it means this. And this is, as I say, when it starts to ramp up.
I think one of the beauties of, well, certainly the last World Cup, in those Game 3 scenarios, we were sitting on the edge of our seats looking at yellow cards. As to who would progress because of all the different permutations in all the different groups. And then kind of given this expanded format and everything that's been made of it, you wonder if that comes into play again. And now, again, if you're South Africa, given what happened in match day 1, that affects things. I think I said it was Mbatha who got carded early on. It was Mofo Keng early on. He was substituted at halftime. Those things factor in. He is their kind of midfield enforcer. Those things may very well play a role at the end of match day 3.
You see, discipline goes a long way, doesn't it, Nedum?
That's what I've heard.
How many cards you ever picked up?
1 or 2 around Christmas time.
Around Christmas time?
Yeah.
Oh, come on. I think there's a bit more. Any straight reds?
Oh, boy.
1
or 2.
He loves us straight reds, this man.
I've had 2 straight reds. Never mind Nedum.
Shaka's the problem.
Just carry on. Just carry on, Alexis.
All right.